Nathalie asked me to kind of lead this session. Um, I guess it's twofold, to bring awareness to the impact that mass incarceration has on our community, and not just necessarily the impact that it has on the person that's incarcerated. And I always like to start off, I consult with Strengthening the Black Church, the same organization that Nathalie is working for. And the role that I play with that organization is that I work with their prison ministry, their national prison ministry team. And every year, we do something that's called the National Prison Summit on Mass Incarceration. And we've been doing this work to bring awareness to the local church about the impact that mass incarceration has, not just on the person that's incarcerated, but generally as a community. And so I always like to start off by asking, kind of some very personal questions. And I did this because how many of you know who Bishop T.D. Jakes is? Okay. I was at his church one Sunday. I was invited to a program. They have a program called the Tory Program. And I was invited to his church by the executive director of that program. And it was a day that they actually did a graduation. It was a graduation ceremony. And they graduated, it was like over 100 persons who had been in prison for years and years and years. And when they got out, they went to this reentry program that Bishop Jakes has in Dallas, and they spent about 10 months in a restoration program, reentering them back into community, where they learn, obviously, spiritual principles, but just things to help them get on their feet. Many of them, started being a barber. They went to beauty school and all kinds of things to help them reenter back into the community. Well, this day, it was a Sunday morning, and he said, okay, I want anyone who has a loved one, a mama or a daddy or uncle or a cousin, anybody that knows anybody that is in prison, please stand up. And when he said that, about 10,000 people stood up. Everybody in the church stood up. And it was so powerful because nobody knew, that anybody would stand up, because generally, if you have somebody that's in prison, mama, daddy, or whatever, you ain't trying to tell nobody, because it's somewhat embarrassing. Or there's a stigma attached to it. So I ask this question every place I go. If you have someone that you know, mama, daddy, cousin, uncle, that is incarcerated, raise your hand. Okay. And then the next question I ask is, and this is your own thinking question. This is not a question that, if you want to share, you can, but you don't have to. But it's like, then how connected are you to that individual that's incarcerated? That's one question. Then the next question is that how has that shaped who you are and your living wellness with that person that's incarcerated, okay? And I began to have to ask my own self those questions, because my husband, who was a pastor, a United Methodist pastor, also a commissioner, worked for the mayor for the city of Dallas, found himself in a storm almost 10 years ago. And it was a storm that rocked the entire city of Dallas with a case of corruption and mishandling of taxpayers' dollars. It was a corrupt situation where it was about 15 black men that were politicians and people like that. And my husband was one of those persons. And one day we looked up and I found myself parenting single because he had been sentenced to 14 years in the Federal Correctional Institute. And I just could not imagine myself ever thinking that I would be in this position, in this situation. And so it put me in a mode of having two boys. At the time, they were in middle school. They were in small private Catholic middle school. And we were, middle-class family, doing fine and well and that sort of thing. And it put me in a different place and space, and had to make some choices. So after his sentencing, my moment was about the protection of the kids, because I never forget that while I was doing some research about, okay, what happens, what is going to happen when he go to jail, and, and just trying to really work through all of that with him, I ran across this statistic that said, if you have a parent that is incarcerated, then you yourself are 70% more likely to be in jail. 70%. So immediately, my attention had to shift to the boys, because I'm like, okay, now I'm fighting against a curse. I'm fighting against something that could be generational. And so one of the things that we began to do is I began to share with them. And even though you're in middle school now, this is what we got to do, because now you're in a whole nother statistic bracket. So when we talk about living well and the impact that incarceration has on our community, what ways do you think, outside of incarceration being in the prison, where else does it impact? I asked D'Angelo that question. I said, okay, how has this really affected you? What are some of the areas that you think you could be affected by? Cannot vote. The loss of your right to vote in some instances. So, voting rights. Finding a job. The highest recidivism rate. The reason why people can't stay out of jail is because they can't get a job when they get out of jail.
Just like your social and physical, a lot of times you have a harder time adapting back to the real world once you're out, especially if you're in for a long period of time.
That's right. And you know what? And we'll talk a little bit about that. It's called post-traumatic syndrome. People don't look at that. They just look at that in war. But when you are in post-traumatic, and it's also in children. When you have a parent that is absent, there's some trauma that happens there. Yes, sir?
You're also facing the stigma that comes with being an ex-inmate or ex-convict.
The stigma of being an ex-convict, having some letters attached to your name, and it's not PhD. Exactly. That's right. And when somebody gets your application, and you have to reveal that. Yes, ma'am. You cannot give financial aid to school if you're a felon. Did y'all know that? If you have a felony on your record, just say that you've been in jail since juvenile, that your history started at 12, and you come out and you're 19, 20, 25 years old, and you want to go get your education, you can't get government money. No Pell Grants.
Shouldn't that just add in, really just throwing you into poverty,
There you go. Another impact, poverty. If you have some restrictions on your parole and probation. There are restrictions to your life, where you can go and where you can't go. Did you have your hands up? Okay. Yes, ma'am. You lose connection. Absolutely, you lose connection, family and friends. D'Angelo, you remember when we went to Arizona to see your dad? And see, because he was in a camp, a federal camp. And so we live in Texas, and they sent him to Arizona. And so it was probably a year. He was a year into his sentence before he even got a visit from us. Because guess what that meant for me? Economics, I got to work, I got to take off work, I got to buy plane tickets. It just was an impact. So we went to Arizona, and we flew into El Paso, then we flew into Phoenix, then we had to take a car and go to Tucson and go up this mountain or what have you to get there for what? A 4-hour visit. And then the trauma that it was to have to leave and go back, get back on the plane or what have you, they get to school and they acting crazy. It's like, you know what, okay, we have to really deal with this. And so for us and our family, which a lot of us don't do, we couldn't have that connection. because it was an adverse impact. And so we have to really work through that. We have to really work through that. Let me get to, let me show you guys, let me get to that first slide with the statistics. Because y'all hear the saying that says numbers don't what? Numbers don't lie. Let's go to the very second slide. I think it's the second one. Yeah, the second one. Did you know? So here's what, to stay lit and to stay woke, this is what you have to know about the economics of this thing. $80 billion is spent every single year on incarceration. $80 billion. The great state of Tennessee, that's where you all have the headquarters for the CCA, okay? And so you have to understand that there are companies that are on the New York Stock Exchange that are benefiting and preparing to ensure that they have their profits. 2 out of 3 return after just 3 years of being out. More males today are enslaved than it was in 1850. The United States ranks #1 in incarcerating our people. We rank 14th in reading, 20th in science, 30th in math, and we have the most arrests related to drugs. And it ain't cocaine, and opioids, and meth. It's not that. It's weed. Long sentences. Long sentences for that. So what is important to know is that when we begin to understand the system, because the statistic says that in the 3rd and 4th grade, that's when CCA is determining how many beds they're going to build for prison, for incarceration. The 3rd and 4th grade. So it's based off of reading scores. And if we are the 14th from the bottom in reading. So as you all are looking and discerning where your place is and where you fit, and I tell people all the time that prison ministry, going in and doing prison ministry in the prisons may not be your thing, but this could be your thing to help some 3rd and 4th graders not get in the pipeline. This could be your thing. And that's one of the things that we do at our National Prison Summit is that we help equip community and churches and organizations on how to go in and do holistic prison and social justice ministry. Let's go to the next slide. 7% of all children under the age of 18, that's more than 5 million children, y'all, have lived with a parent who has gone to jail or prison. 7%, or more than 5 million children, have a parent that's either been in jail, or in prison. 7 million kids. I mean, can you just imagine that? So you go to any local school and just go into a classroom and stand up 20 kids, you're probably going to have at least 3 of them that has a parent that's incarcerated. And this is a number from 2008. So that's not a long time ago. Next slide. Now, living well, the impact of mass incarceration, the biggest impact is economics. That's the biggest impact. If you don't have money, you can't do what? You can't bail out. And then you can't get appropriate representation. And then you are railroaded in a system. And then you're leaving a person that's single behind that has to take up the economic slack. And then you have to, the school and education and things of that nature that you have to do. So 1 in 8 poor black kids. When you break that 5 million down, it's black children, all children. Go to the last slide that has number 7, slide number 7. Yeah, that's it. Any of you all know anybody that's been in foster care or maybe have grown up in foster care? Okay. 50% of children who grew up in the foster care system, black or Latino, are pushed into the prison pipeline. I'm only sharing this with you guys because I'm trying to create an awareness for you to discern where you can make a difference and where you can serve. 30% of foster care children who enter the juvenile justice system, mostly on behavior, and could be resolved if someone knew how to reach those kids. One of the things that when we went through our situation, and I travel a lot. I do a lot of work with the NBA, the NFL, and different places like that. And I was at the All-Star Weekend working on a gospel program. I do a lot of production work. And it was February 2014? And my son has always been into photography and music and things of that nature. And now they were home, and I was in New Orleans, and he and his little brother, one of his friends called and said, hey, we have a party that we're doing. Somebody's doing a party. Can y'all come over and take some pictures, shoot the party, that sort of thing. And so they went. He grabbed his camera and everything, and they went. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call that he had been shot 2 times in the back, and his brother was hysterical, and he almost died. And he spent 9 days in the hospital, and punctured his lungs, broke his ribs, or what have you. But what that said to me was that there are situations that when the enemy opens up a door that's in your family or in your life, if you don't be intentional about shutting that door, then a lot of things are gonna walk through your way. And so what I realized is that when my husband went to prison, that was a door that was open, and I had to understand how to live into that space besides being very angry and in a position to where I really didn't know why it happened to us. So I threw myself into this work. I threw myself into this service, and I began to work through the Prison Summit and try to encourage other people to really understand how this pipeline is being fed in. And so the biggest work that we're doing right now is the school to prison pipeline and the cradle to prison pipeline. That's the largest work that we're doing, and that everybody that we talk to, because we know it starts with the young people in the schools, it starts in juvenile, it starts in foster care. It starts with children and young people. Because everybody has a story, but everybody are not able to express. And he worked with me when we went to counseling, because I'm like, that's what we need to do. We need to go and talk to somebody. We need to go and process this out. And that's one thing about living well and healthy, is that we are able to process things out with professionals. Yeah, we can take it to the Lord in prayer, but we also need to go and talk to somebody. You guys have any questions so far? Because I brought him here to answer some questions if y'all had some. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm a freshman. I'm a speech and language pathology major, and I'm from Atlanta, Southwest Atlanta, so here. Um, my question to you was, how did your emotions and everything change when your dad went away? Because growing up, I was a daddy's girl, so I was under my daddy everywhere he went. So when he went to prison, it forced me to get closer to my mom because I was young, but I was growing up, so I didn't understand why he went away, or I felt like he was taken from me. So that was like a process. It wasn't easy. So I think the toughest part for me was understanding I can't even tell my dad how a full day went because I'm constantly getting reminded on the phone, you have this much time left and this much time left. And not only that, what was even harder was explaining to my little sister. She doesn't even know what jail is, so I'm saying, Dad is going to be back. He's just on vacation. But saying away, then that comes with, well, why and what happened and how long. So it was hard. So getting closer to my mom kind of helped, but it was still a hole in me that said, I just miss my daddy. Like, I just want a hug. And sometimes I feel like I should have went to see him, but that would have made it much harder for me because coming back home, the only thing I could think about is, that's my daddy. Like, I look at him way different from a uniform, a number, where he is, how he sleep, what he has to eat, what he has to go through. So it was kind of hard. So everybody has a story to tell, but I feel like it's just so much that you can go through. And even though he isn't in prison today, I still wonder, like, sometimes I want to ask, like, how did it feel being away from me? Because it hurt me way more than I feel like it would hurt you because it was a bad decision you made, but it kind of scarred me. So.
So D'Angelo talk about the emotions and what his.
So, when I talk about the emotions that I felt, it really just forced me to grow up. Really, it really did. Cause like she said, you know, me and my dad, we had a relationship, but we didn't have the best relationship. You know, he was a really smart man, and I kind of struggled in school a lot. You know, he probably got on me a bunch of times and everything. He was wondering how come I wasn't straight A's, doing all this and all that stuff. But he was still a good dad. But see, the thing about him is that the last time we saw him, it was a very, very traumatic experience. He came home kind of out of his mind because they've been going through the court systems and everything, and just know it was a bad experience. The last time I saw him. So the last thing that I remember with seeing him is having my little brother sit on the side of me, and I have to calm him down and make sure everything was good. And then the next day when we went to school, they called us out, and that's when my mother was in the car crying, and she told us that he got 14 years. See, it's one thing to actually think about something, okay, something's gonna be all right, it's gonna be good, but when you actually hear the words and your reality starts to set in, that's a whole different ball game. And the one thing my dad told me, he probably doesn't remember this, that you have to grow up. You have to be the man of the house. You have to take care of your mother, take care of your brother, no more childish games. And I was already kind of like that growing up. I've always been really independent about myself, and it was kind of an easy transition, but it is the fact that from 8th grade, when I was 13, stuff like that, I had to learn how to be a man. I had to learn how to be a man all by myself. And all the dudes in here who either has a father or doesn't have a father, you can try to play tough all you want. You can try to, be macho and everything. You miss your father. Every man needs another role model in his life to build him up. I don't care what you say about that, all right? You could be like, I can do this all by myself. I taught myself how to do this. I can do all that. That's great, but you're hurting inside. Believe me, you are. It literally took me till I was 19. I'm about to be 23 in November. It took me till 19 to resurface myself with Jesus Christ. It really did. After going through so many different trials, tribulations, almost dying, in order for me to just say, you know what, Lord, take the wheel. I need you in my life. And that's pretty much how it went for me.
And then another thing is that, the emotional part for me was when it was time for them to, like I remember having to call their coach to teach them how to tie a tie when it was like prom time and all that kind of stuff. And so their coach came to the house to help them get ready because I was like on YouTube and, I'm like, dang, I don't know how to tie a tie, and they wanted special ties. They wanted a special knot and, we saw this, we want the bow, one of my sons, Adam wanted a bow tie or you wanted the bow tie. But, so it was always a milestone. So it's always something. It's a birthday or you're 16 or you getting your driver's license. It's time to teach you how to drive. So it was always something that put us in an emotional space. But one of the things that he didn't say is that I kept us in counseling. When we got to those milestones and we got to those bumps in the road, it was like, okay, it's time. We need to go have a session, and really talk through that. And I believe that, but the most important thing is that before he left, we went to counseling to talk about the transition, to talk about what it was going to be like when he left. So he set the tone for therapy, and so I appreciate that. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm pretty sure it's because experience is the best teacher, honestly. You probably have like, a friend or I guess a family member that's been to prison or, that's died or, does drugs a lot. Yep, that's a good thing. Yeah, one of the people that actually kept us in line is that I had a really, really good background growing with my friends and my family members. My cousin Kevin, he was kind of like, he was kind of just, trying to make it really, trying to make it. He didn't have the best job. He was just trying to do what's right. And he pretty much took the role of raising me and my little brother, and also my Uncle Rusty, RP to him. He was like my next big father figure out there. He taught me how to hustle. Say that, yeah. Taught me how to hustle. Taught me how to hustle. Taught me how to make money. Taught me how to always keep my head up and everything, and just never let anybody take advantage of you and all that. So. Yeah, him and my dad were really close. He actually wanted him to be that role model in our life while he went away, and yeah, that's pretty much how I got through that.
And then he had a crazy mama. So, okay. Uh-huh. You got it? Okay.
So, hi everybody, I'm Terry, Fisk University sociology major. I actually have somebody that was very close to me that has been in and out of jail for like the past 6 years of my life. And he was my cousin. We used to do everything together. And seeing him go through that process, like I saw him change, as he was coming in and out, like physically, mentally, everything about him has like changed. And it's the mentality of somebody who gets out of jail and who is repeatedly going back. It's like almost giving up. Like, I'm done. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the mindset that I see. And it's like, how do you, one, with the youth, get them to care about it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest question I have. And secondly, for those people that come in and out of jail, like how do you get them to care? You know what I mean? So it's like for the children first and then.
You know what? our community is in such trauma. It really is. And people will say to you, and the system will tell you that jail or prison is a rehabilitation center. That when we sentence you for a crime or for doing punishment, then we're sentencing to you to the Texas Rehabilitation Center. The title itself will say that, you know, when you come out, you're going to be different. You're going to be rehabbed, and preferably when you rehab something to the best, to the better. But it's not. It absolutely is not. And the reason why the reason why I think it is, and what I think we have to do, is that we have to care more about people who are locked up. We don't care. Especially as a community. As a Black community, we are conditioned that if you're in jail, you probably done did something to be there. But now, with the social media and these phones and all that he's talking about, it's a whole lot of people that we know that don't supposed to be in jail. So we have to rise up in a whole nother level of consciousness to care again for our people who are encaged and enslaved. Because you do know that the 13th Amendment says, okay, that slavery shall be abolished unless you are incarcerated. So we got to know the truth of what's happening. And the truth is that it's a reversed, it's a plan for enslavement. So we have to care for our young people. And we got to care for the people who are there and know that when they come out looking different, smelling different, walking different, and thinking different, is because they've been on the plantation, beat into submission. So you're dealing with trauma. And you have to combat, listen, you have to combat trauma by facing it right there as it is and be able to try to reprogram. Dude, when you go in there, you are programmed. You got to try to and that's through love, and it's through relationship, and it's through breaking down the stigma, and it's through, you know, okay, you smell different, but still come over to the house and sit down and let's eat. We're going to go down to the church. They got a pantry over there. We're going to get you some clean clothes. You know, it's through connection. It's through reconnecting, and it's through a restorative justice. We got to know how to restore people. We don't do that very well. Yes, sir.
I am Trayvon Jones from Tennessee State University, senior mass communications major. My question is more so directed to you. I just heard what you said that we don't care enough, and I immediately thought in my head because I look like most everybody in this room, so I can attest to being in this situation, or you know what I'm saying, knowing someone in this situation. And me personally, I don't think that we don't care, but we don't have what it takes, or that extra drive that you had to say, I'm pushing myself in this, and I'm going to dissect this. Like, let me see what the 13th Amendment says.
Yes.
Let me get these statistics and go to a seminar and put in front of young black adults. So my question is, I guess, what was that extra oomph? Because we all have that. They shouldn't be in jail. My uncle shouldn't be in jail. My dad shouldn't be in jail. What was that extra push that said, no, it's more than me saying they shouldn't be in jail. Let me do something about it.
The push was my kids. It wasn't even so much as a daddy, okay? Because, you know, while I believe that, you know, 14 years was excessive, because it really was like a 3-year, you know, 36-month type of deal, but then you're dealing with a judicial system where you expect, you know, justice. But justice is not justice for us as it is for, you know, other people. So, for me, it was them. That was my drive. It wasn't even my brother, who had been in and out of prison all of his life. He was in and out of prison because he was addicted to crack cocaine. And so whatever he needed to do to get crack cocaine, he committed those crimes to do it. So in my head, yeah, you probably need to be there because I'm sick of you stealing from my mama anyway. I mean, I'm just being real because we all had them in our family. But then it wasn't even that for me. But then when it became about my seed, then I realized that it was other mamas out there that had a seed, but may not have known what I know. So it became my mission to do what I'm doing now. Let me go right here. You had a question. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Lindsay White. I'm a doctoral student in Howard University Education Ministry Policy Studies. And so I'm more concerned about like the systemic aspects that are kind of underplaying all of this. And so if you could maybe just speak to like how systemically we can address these issues, because yes, I agree that these are horrific events that are occurring.
Mhm.
But this rhetoric of yes, we need to galvanize our
Okay.
communities, yes, we need to do these things, but like systematically.
So the systemic aspect for addressing starts in education and it starts in the home. So systemically, we are being miseducated and we are pushing children into a pipeline. Systemically, you have independent school districts that are building kindergartner systems for alternative schools. I mean, that's a system. And so we have an educational institution that is not equipped with 21st century methods for education because of the societal issues that kids bring to the classroom. So when Johnny, comes to the school with a knife in his backpack because he's had to, or Sarah, because she had to sleep with it because mama's boyfriend comes in at night sometimes and she's sick of him doing that. Those are the systems that we're dealing with in our communities.
So can I just ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So oftentimes in the African American community, there's this misconception around mental health, right? And so we will seek God, but we don't necessarily want to go to see like a psychologist or a social worker. And so what was that turning point for you to say, yes, I want to be able to do both? Because I recognize I need to seek a higher power, but I also recognize that there are some issues that my children are going to face, and I need to be able to address them from a clinical standpoint.
Well, my parents were college educated, and then their parents were college educated, and I come from a family of 12, and it's two of us that do not have higher level degrees, lawyers and stuff like that. So from a family system, I knew that that was what we needed to do. But I recognize that that's not the norm for African American family. So I think that from the pulpit in churches and clergy leaders and pastors, that they have to make it okay. And I think in this day and age, many of them are, because a lot of churches now have full service counseling centers.
Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Redmond. I go to Russ College and my major is criminal justice. This is kind of a topic that I'm very, very passionate on. I'm very irritated at the criminal justice system because that's why my major is criminal justice. But who is all interested in going to seminary? Anybody interested in going to church? But the church is the center of the Black community. If we all get together and get into the churches and when we get
One last question. Well, you, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Leona Dunn, Mass Comm major, Tennessee State University. It was just a question that was asked earlier. I think it relates to some things. I had a cousin named Charles who was in and out of jail, and then also, like, I'm a foster kid. All of my sisters, we're all foster kids, and so someone asked him about caring and stuff earlier, like how can you show that you care? I know that my cousin, when he got out, before he went back in, he let us all know that, like, as soon as he went in the first time, we really did, like, we wrote him like letters, and then and he like literally looked forward every day to those letters, and then it gets to the point where it's like, he's been in for 1 year, he's been in for 2 years, and you don't find the time, and then the letters stop messing up, and then he gets him, and then when he doesn't have family or any connection to the outside, he starts getting family and stuff on the inside, and it like creates this communal thing. So I know it's like very simple and stuff like that. We always do it at our school. We give it to like the soldiers and stuff like that. But if you, we all have like local juvenile
Yes.
places and stuff like that. And if you could write a letter and make a connection and stuff like that, I know that like gives a lot of people hope, because like she said, it shows that someone, I don't even know who you are, outside cares, and it's like if somebody cares, maybe I should care a little bit. But then when it gets to the point where it's like I'm totally void of the outside world, I don't have a daughter making a call, and I don't have friends or family that care that I'm even in here, and that's what the guards and stuff tell them, like nobody care about you, like sit down, shut up, da da da. And it's like that it makes an impact on, like, I think them coming out and being like, I don't care, nobody cares, and
Mm-hmm.
go back and do whatever
Right.
we're doing. So it's just a thing.
Thank you for that, and we'll talk. I'm gonna wrap it up with some solutions when you.
I'm Yasmin Nante. I'm a senior. My major is child, education major. I'm a senior at FAMU. So my question is, do you feel like the public education system now are raising children up to and leading them into prisons based off the way that the school system is set up and how they are literally the same, it's like the same system in prison and the same system in school. You pee at a certain time, you go outside when we tell you to, you walk on these lines, you wear the uniform when we tell you to, you were disciplined if you follow, you do whatever that you're not supposed to do. But do you feel like that is another reason that a lot
Well, let me just put it this way. I don't feel like that they're raising them to go to college. I don't feel like that they're raising them to go to college, because I mean, I remember being in school, and in school for me it was a creative experience. We had music, we had art, and we had, I mean, I remember a very different experience than but his school was very different than our local public school. He was in a small Catholic school. I mean, they just did stuff differently. So I don't believe that. I think we are challenged in our education system. We really are. Okay, Reverend Michelle, and then. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, three things that I want you to remember today is, number one, you can make a difference. Where you are, doing what you're doing, from writing a letter, pen paling, to challenging your church to be holistic in its approach to helping people with mental health. You can make a difference, that's number one. Number two, on October the 25th in Nashville, Tennessee, the National Prison Summit is doing a pre-summit intensive. It's called Reforming Education in America, Dismantling the School-to-Prison Pipeline. For more details, you could go to prisonsummit.com, okay? That's going to be on the 25th. And then the 26th and 27th, we have a National Prison Summit on mass incarceration, where we're going to be dealing with reforming criminal justice, policy, equipping churches with a whole array of things and opportunities. So make a difference. And if you are a person in this room that's personally impacted, just know that God is good, and he's a healer, and he's a deliverer, okay? Let me close us in prayer. God, we thank you for this time on today. We thank you for this living well moment, the opportunity to share our stories, God. We thank you that you created a safe place, God, for these students to share what was on their heart. Now, Lord, I ask that you move and that you rest and rule and abide with each and every last one of them, Father, as they move forward in their discerning process, God, that you will heal whatever holes are in their hearts, God, mend whatever is broken, Father, and set the captives free. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.